one of the chapters was Nikola Tesla, the Pete Peterson and Nikola Tesla Black Ops.
Yep.
One of them is about Black Jesus, where there's a ascended being appearing in Africa.
Yep.
And I just want to know if you know any more information you would share with us, because I thought that was very captivating to me, and I just wanted more information on it.
Yeah, the Black Jesus story. The Black Jesus story was probably one of the most shocking things I ever heard. It came from my insider, Jacob, I call him that in the book, who actually was working for the Rothschilds and still does, and also is a whistleblower who doesn't really do what they want but continues to work for them because he feels like there's some very serious extraterrestrial threats to Earth and that what they're doing is very necessary to protect us. So the story goes that in the 1960s, there was a black man in Africa who came in with abilities complementary to those of Jesus. And he was performing miracles. He was starting to get people to listen to what he had to say. And the cabal tried to kill him, and, they could shoot him in the head, and his skull would just regenerate, and the flesh would grow back, and he was fine. And, so the crazy story that I heard, and remember, I was told at the time that if I disclosed this, that I would be killed, and I ended up putting it in the book anyway. The story was that this guy, they finally said, okay, we're going to bring you to the United Nations and share your message with the world. Let's get you on this flight. They bring him on this flight, and instead of bringing him to the United Nations, they shot him repeatedly, and then actually had some kind of meat grinder device, and basically like a bandsaw, I guess, and sawed up his body into a whole bunch of pieces, put him in these very like radioactive shielded containers, and then had all these fighter jets dock with the plane and fly his body parts to all corners of the world, where then these containers turned them into ash. And they thought that maybe this would defeat him, like that his body somehow, the tissue was necessary. So if they destroyed all the tissue in all these places across the world, maybe they could defeat him. Well, he then regenerated in their offices and was fully fine, fully intact. But the sad part is that he said, you guys so badly do not want me to be here that I am not going to be able to do any more. You're going to get what you want, but bear in mind that in the future, many others like me will be coming, and when they do, you will not be able to stop us.
Wow. Well,
that is all I know. Unfortunately, there's nothing more to the story than that.
Incredible.
But it is an incredible story.
Incredible.
It is generally recounted by witnesses that SimeonToko appeared before people in an apparitional body and in dream states while he was physically alive. At least one witness who was hired to kill him said he personally killed this man, quite professionally, as a hired killer, and saw him alive again a few days later. Others still living at the time of this writing said that they saw Toko physically slaughtered and watched him bring himself back to life before their astonished eyes. There is a very large body of testimony, of which only a little has yet been recorded or written down from eyewitnesses. This is the story of the man who single-handedly gave defeat to the Belgian army. The truth is stranger than fiction. The unbelievable spiritual power of one man that overcame the Belgian army. Is this a real-life African avatar? It all began because Leopold II wanted his country to join the League of European Empires, but the Belgian state refused to finance its part in Western Europe's expensive scramble for Africa, so they outsourced the task to Leopold, who used personal diplomacy to convince the European powers to grant him control of a large portion of the Congo basin. He promised to bring civilization to the so-called Dark Continent. Christ in the Congo Free State in 1885, Leopold's playground was an astonishing 17 times the size of Belgium, comprised largely of unmapped jungle. It was initially a huge financial burden, but when worldwide demand for rubber boomed, Leopold cashed in, Congolese workers were sent out into the jungle to slash down vines and layer their bodies with rubber latex. Later, they would scrape it off their skin, often taking flesh and hair with it. Their work was labor-intensive and injurious to health. The only economical way to collect it was via the forced mobilization of Congolese society. The Congo Free State evolved from a vanity possession into a slave plantation. According to History Today, Leopold's Hell operated by an insane logic. Villages were set quotas of rubber, and the gendarmerie were sent in to collect it, a process that was sped up by looting, arson, and rape. If a village failed to reach its quota, hostages would be taken and shot. To ensure that the gendarmerie didn't waste their bullets hunting for food, they were required to produce the severed hands of victims. As a consequence, a trade in severed hands developed among the villagers and those police that couldn't reach their quotas. It was during this time, 33 years after the atrocities started in the Congo, that SimeonToko was born in 1918. SimeonToko was born on February 24, 1918, in a northern village in Angola. Not long after Simeon's birth, a missionary at a Baptist missionary society based in Angola had a dream. He dreamed that a great king had been born in the region under his ministry. He decided to go looking for this baby. In 1949, SimeonToko asked in his public prayer that the Holy Spirit manifest in Africa to put an end to the abuses of the colonial powers. Toko became a dedicated member of the Baptist Church of Antigua. On October 1949, SimeonToko held up both hands, spread out his fingers, and told the abusive Belgian to count them. He said, "I give 10 years to the Belgian, not one more or less, to leave this country." As for the other mysterious statement made by SimeonToko, 10 years later in 1960, the Belgians were obliged to leave their rich colony of Congo. This incident was confirmed in Angola in 1994 by Pastor Adelino Kanhandi, who was a cook at the Kakonda agriculture compound where it happened. On January 4, 1959, witnesses attest that many cherubim and seraphim emerged and held off Belgian colonial army. Citizens of Leopoldville saw an army of about 1,000 angels, non-terrestrials, very muscular bodies, imposing. These human-looking beings, but with supernatural powers, demonstrating an extraordinary force. For example, a witness saw one of them on the road sweeping a 5-ton truck with one hand. Belgian soldiers opened fire on these angels, but to no effect. Colonial army was in a panic and disorder. Angels disappeared as suddenly as had appeared. According to the African natives that day, SimeonToko had unleashed his army. 4th of January is the day of celebration today in Kinshasa. A year after this extraordinary event, Congo became an independent country, for the Belgians were forced to leave their rich colonies of Congo. Some of these attempts were witnessed by Pastor Kahandi himself. In fact, it was the outcome of one of these murders that made Pastor Kahandi a believer. SimeonToko was incarcerated and, for the purpose of stemming his popularity and breaking his followers. After being deported and arriving in Angola, never again would SimeonToko rest. His life would be a string of non-stop attempts to kill him to prevent his mission. Let us follow what he experienced from Leopoldville, where he was unjustly incarcerated, to Angola. While incarcerated in Angola, the Portuguese authorities deported him to the Colanato of Vale do Loje in the municipality of Bembe, northern Angola. Number 2. From Bembe to Waba Kokonda. All of these deportations took place in a 12-year period. SimeonToko's captivity in these prisons and agricultural compounds lasted from 3 months, as at San da Bandeira, to as long as 5 years, as at Ponta Albina. Thus, when he was sent to slavery in an agricultural field in Kakonda in southern Angola, his head was offered for a price. 2 Portuguese foremen, excited by the reward, decided to take their chance. They put a plan into action to murder SimeonToko. During a stay in Angola in 1994, we collected the testimony of Pastor Adelino Kanhandi, who was a cook at the Kakonda agriculture compound. He saw what happened. Busy with cooking, he heard a voice calling him, "Kahandi, Kahandi, come here." It was SimeonToko. Once outside, surprised and curious, Toko told him to stand there and be watchful. Once again, the Son of Man will be tested. Strange words in particular for Kahandi, who was not then a Christian and didn't understand the term of what SimeonToko wanted of him. Curious, he watched. One of the Portuguese foremen showed up and hailed SimeonToko. "Hey Simeon, you see that tractor over there? There are weeds clogging the sower. Go clean them out." Submissively, the docile prisoner crawled under the engine to fix it. When he was under the engine, the foreman sitting in the driver's seat started it up, which automatically activated the rotating blades of the seed sower. SimeonToko's body was instantly severed in several pieces. Terrified, Kahandi stood frozen to the spot, watching. The foreman shifted into reverse to back up and check the damage. A second foreman, who was in service as a flashed a victory sign indicating that they had succeeded. Then the unbelievable happened. Before Kahandi and the two Portuguese accomplices, the body of SimeonToko recomposed itself. SimeonToko stood up. Kahandi could not believe his eyes. The Portuguese ran away in terror. From that day on, Kahandi believed in the Lord, and his entire family converted to the church of SimeonToko. It was also that day that SimeonToko made it known who he was behind that smallpox-marred face, purposefully behaving in accord with the following scripture. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. In another instance, the plot was to drown him at sea. In the plane with SimeonToko sat a Catholic priest and members of Salazar's secret police known as PIDE DGS, including the pilot and co-pilot. Their mission was to fly over the Atlantic Ocean and after about an hour's distance, push SimeonToko out of the plane into the deep sea. The moment the PIDE agents rose to subdue him and carry out their murder, SimeonToko stood up and ordered the plane to stop. The aircraft stopped in midair. It stood still, not advancing an inch, nor rose or fell backward. The crew was stricken by panic. The priest could hardly breathe, and hoarsely huffed out desperate prayers. Simeon lifted his eyes and hands toward the heaven, and after a short prayer, he ordered the plane to move again. At once, the plane started moving. Another story refers to a most remarkable attempt by some astonishingly misguided men to kill Simeon. Tools under dictator Antonio Salazar's orders. Some doctors found themselves reading the reports of his purported invincibility. They thought they might pass the time by drilling for the secret, which seemed to protect the mysterious African man. They meant to perform an autopsy on a living human being. Under the pretext of removing a tumor in his chest, the doctors had SimeonToko taken to a hospital. They put him on an operating table, cut a jagged mortal wound in the left side of the center of his chest, reached into his chest cavity, and pulled out his still beating heart. The aorta and other arteries were severed by scalpel, and his heart was removed. Simeon lay dead, his body covered with warm blood that splashed out of his heart and chest. SimeonToko came to on the operating table. To their horror and bewilderment, his heartless corpse was moving on its own volition. He opened his eyes, sat up, and looked at them, the chest wound by which they had casually murdered him gaping open. Why are you persecuting me this way? He said to them. Give me my heart back. SimeonToko, showing the big scar where he was operated on by his killers, who took out his heart. He woke up without a heart, stood up, and asked for his heart back. During the night of December 31st to January 1st, 1984, when the media announced the death of SimeonToko, thunderclaps of virtually seismic force and torrential rain burst the skies of Luanda. It had not rained in this area for several years. Meteorologists were mystified. For 3 days the rain fell continuously. The occurrence of this event was attributed to all the rumors surrounding the death of this great prophet.
All I need is just a little bit of love and a little bit of joy. Make me smile. You don't even have to get this stuff from me, but I'm doing that for me. I love you still. All I need is just a little bit of time to have her on my mind. Yesterday I sent you numbers and you tripped. She was wondering who was this. Thank you.